I appreciate your patience while I take long pauses between each phrase. I'm allowing the translators to finish translating those who are watching on the internet. There are 4 or 5 different translators. We have to be patient with them. And it allows my gaze on you to be more profound. If I teach today a simple and joyful wisdom about numbers, colors, planets, days of the week, rocks and their properties, what the typical New Ager enjoys. And I have never taught that before as an official seminar. Is it because I find it to be insignificant? Not important? No. If the majority of people will not get the wisdom at the level I wish to teach it, I will not give a teaching. Numbers, if they are seen as tools of mathematics, I will not teach you about numbers. If you see numbers as a clairvoyance tool to tell your future or your life path, I will not teach you of numbers. If numbers remain intellectual notions or guidelines to avoid your insecurities, I will not teach it. Because numbers are perfect expressions of love. And if you are caught in your mind, incapable of feeling the number, I will not teach. A number is a prayer. And if you do not see the beauty of prayer in counting, then you will not see the truth of numerology, astrology, notaricon, or gematria. You will not see it. Okay? If I teach numbers and colors and planets, it will be about the interactions of Yahweh in the world. As a way to be sensitive to the notion of no mind. A number that structures your intellect is very useful to get on time at your meeting, or to close the oven when the meal is finished cooking. If numbers is something that only directs your life, you are a slave of causality and structures. So there is beauty in numbers, in colors, in properties of rocks and astrological signs. There is communion and prayer. And if I teach them, it will be a work of art as much as a science. on understanding and experience. Breathe. It will be fun, it will be technical, your intellect will be satisfied. 1. The origin, when it starts, not the origin when it doesn't start. So if you have the number 71, 1 does not mean the origin. But if you have the number 17, 1 means the origin, when it is the origin. A number will have a meaning if it starts a sequence, another meaning when it is anywhere else in the sequence, and another meaning when it is at the end of a sequence. So a number can have 3 meanings according to its interaction with the sequence. This is where the principles of unity were always very confusing between the number 1 and the number 6. The 6 of unifying or communion, or the one of the unity itself. For example, interpreting 1 as an action of unification is inadequate. 1 is not an action. Causality starts with 5. We'll see this when we talk of 5. So 1 is not an action. So if you interpret numbers or tarot cards, you have 1, and it starts with 1, it's the origin. And the Kabbalists will refer to the Aleph when it starts a word. It is from vacuity. That is 1. When 1 is not the origin, but somewhere in a number, in a sequence, then 1 is the potential of the origin, but not the origin itself. Meaning, this powerful presence of consciousness in the Yawan technique, this power that comes from the origin, which is still in the origin, but not talking specifically of the origin. That is 1, when it is somewhere in the sequence. When it finishes with 1, it is the result. You will be conscious. It is either about the future in terms of prediction, or it signifies an end result in terms of a now, reading or experience. So it is the origin, the consciousness, or the resulting awakening. So it is Keter, if you want, as what is the first thing that came out of vacuity. It is the Keter when it is given to every other sphere. Well, we say in Kabbalah that every sphere is in the following ones. And in Malkut you have all of them. And this 1, when it is Malkut, the 10th sphere, which is 1 plus 0 and therefore it's still one. It's awakening. Malkut is the complete consciousness of the origin that undergone the entire process of that presence of power of that consciousness and is finally accomplished, and you have the feeling of that awakening. That is one. In Kujian, Rin, it is just that consciousness. But this is not a class of Kujian. I'm not talking more about the Kujis. If you learn them, it works. You make the reference. If you did not learn them, let's move on to something else. In Kabbalah, 1, 10, and 100 is the same thing. No distinction. 1 is the origin, 10 is that powerful consciousness, and 100 is the resulting awakening. Like if the number 1 is at the first, median, or final position of a series. And then you have Aleph, Yod, and Kaf. The feeling is not human. The feeling of that is not human. It would be hard to know it as love for us. For a human stuck in the lower numbers, the numbers lower than 1 in consciousness are 2 and above in numeric order. Okay. So, what is the feeling of God? That's 1. However, it is also the feeling of ego, of egocentrism. In the number 11 or 111, all is a symbol of consciousness. In 21, there is a duality of that consciousness. 21 means 3, it will expand, therefore there's transformation. But it origins by 2, which can mean duality as much as self-awareness. So by the interpretation of numbers, do not see only God, but also is imitator, the ego. So what is the ego? 1 is the ego. 1 is either the true experience of knowing the truth. I am God, for example. Or it is the imitation. I am God, the ego. And if God is unnamed, then your ego is unnamed. Your ego is not your social name, it's not your soul name, it's not any one of your Buddha nature, it's not something you can call. The supreme divine consciousness is unnamed. cannot conceive it. This is also how to see your ego. So in numeric prediction, if you ask a question relating to your ego, 1 is your imitation of oneness in a very local point of view. I. There's always two interpretations to the numbers. So, reading numbers, and I take 1 just to also teach you about the interpretation of the numbers, because I need to start right now. If you only study the beautiful, glorious side of the number, every reading, every card reading, numerology you'll do will always be very wonderful. From the eyes of God, it is always wonderful. So what's the problem? Is there a judgment or a conflict about 1 just being aware? The answer is yes, if you don't want to be aware. If there's denial. So you ask for a reading, and the outcome is 21. 2 is the beauty of creation. 2 is also the origin, same as 1, but from another point of view. Okay, we'll talk about this in 2, but I'm giving you the example of reading now. 21 can be 2-1, origin of consciousness. Because the 1 is secondary in 21, therefore it does not mean origin. The 2 means origin, not as the origin, but what produces it so we can experience it. The second origin, which is 2. The first letter of the Bible is Be. Be, the number 2. Okay? Because in 1 there's no creation. So the origin, when it is not created yet, is 1. The origin, when it is created in a manifested world, is 2. It's still the origin. And then you have 1 again, 21, 2-1. Always make a total to understand what it means. It means 3. So 2 can be the origin, 1 of consciousness. So, a manifested origin of consciousness, for example, that leads to 3, the principles of interaction, well, expansion, interaction, or transformation, depending on which 3 it is. We'll review that again later. But 3 can be destruction if your 2 does not mean origin, but duality. Why? When 2 is in first position, it can be the principle of what produces the first bhava, the first bait, the first house in which there's something to live. This is the 2. But creation happens through separation. So 2 can mean denial, duality. This duality is the mother pushing out the baby so it comes in the world, which is what we see as beautiful. And it is also what is the experience of separation. I'm out of the heavens, I'm born. So 2, in the beauty of the manifested origin, or the producing of something out of the origin, is separation from the 1. So 2 is not combination. Combination comes with 6. Especially with 2 numbers that equal 6. 2, 4, 1, 5, 3, 3. That's really combination. Anyway, so 2, when it is in the first position, has the beauty of producing, generating, or the beauty yet ugly ego interpretation of separation, isolation, conflict, especially when followed by an odd number. 2, 2, okay, we're gonna find a way to do something. Okay, I have a conflict, but we'll find a solution. We'll organize. Okay, there's no solution yet, but we have the attitude to find it. 2, 1, 2, 7. Ooh, I'm going to cut your head, motherfucker. You know, when we speak of 7, the sword has the power to make decisions or to insult. That's 7. We'll see this. I'm just giving suggestions to start. We viewed 1 first as the origin, medianly as the potential consciousness, and finally as the awareness itself, fully aware. That's the awakening. Now I'm awake after all the process is done. 2 is the origin when it starts, or separation. It is in the median, it is the concept of being inside something, in the womb, or the idea of being in conflict or a slave in a jail. I'm stuck. Bet is something that encloses you. 2 is that duality. The question is, do you want to be with something else, or do you want to be alone? So 2, in its median application, can be communion in the sense to be with God. Communion is 6, but 2 in the sense of still the beauty of the Vishnu, who is in the divine Mahashakti, in the great divine mother. When you feel like that too, when you feel like that me and something else, it's to be with God, the presence. There's no feeling of presence in 1, although 1 is the presence. But the feeling of presence comes with the 2, when there's something to be present to something else. There's no feeling of presence before there is duality to experience it. That's the median 2. And if you feel like it, it will be, I do feel that output of great power, the Mahima experience. 1 is the anima, so subtle, so hard to grasp, but it's all there. 2 is Mahima, oh, I get it. It's all that. Okay? And in 2, in the median 2, Kujian applies mostly to the median experience of the numbers, there is something to interact with. It's not interaction, but in Kyo, there is that concept of there's something else, inside, outside. To be conscious that there's a communication aspect. We're not communicating yet, but there's something to communicate with. So 2 parties involved, or there's an inside and an outside. That is 2. In first position, it is the original outcome, the original production of something, or the feeling of separation. In a median position, it is that being encased in something else, or the inside-outside. There's something to be conscious of. The ability to feel as a conceived being starts with 2. Or the duality and the conflict. If you don't feel like the feeling of the other's presence. Okay? In final position, 2 will be an agreement or a disagreement, depending on if you feel or not to have it. If you are stuck in egocentrism, a final 2 symbolizes that you're not the king of the world at the end. There are others too. So 2 will eventually lead to a 4 of equity. Okay? This principle of there's other. So there's no compassion yet, but there is something to be compassionate about, or to be insulted by greed. Oh, because in the final 2 there's the vicious greed. If you did not feel for someone else to be unequal to you, for another one to be like you are one, especially insulted when the other one is the real one and you are the second one of that too, and your greed is that insatisfaction of that final 2. In the end, I didn't have what I wanted. That 2 will put you in a state of opposition. So 22, the number of the world, is what produced everything as the primary 2. It's a 2-digit number, so there's no median 2. It's the final 2 immediately, and therefore there are others. There are multitude. Okay? So 22 as the final letter, it's also 400 in value. 22 is 4, it's also 400 in Kabbalah. Is that principle of equity of all that was generated. Now we understand 22 a bit better. 22 could be anarchy if the first 2 is your duality and the last 2 your greed. This competition that originated with original generation. Okay? You walk at the clock and you see on the clock 2:22. The total is 6. If you are undecided in life, it means that you're completely greedy and your problem is insatisfaction. If it's about a good feeling, because 6 is also communion, it's not just undecision. 2:22 on the clock is a symbol, for example, of the origin of all things equal, or the world was produced evenly for everything, which requires your humility and gratitude. The way out of the black 2, the negative 2, the black 2 actually is, from another point of view, the good one. The way out of the dark 2, the evil 2, is gratitude in the sense of a consciousness of thank you for what was produced, admitting that me as a localized human, I did not produce everything. I am produced as much as one with the producer. Right? So I don't have this privileged superiority that belongs only to the one. Except when it's the ego pretending. Like we've seen. This powerful 2 is the strongest force in the universe. It is the giving birth, and then anything can happen. And it will happen either to humility and gratitude of collaboration of feeling part of a team, the 2 that encases you where there's you and another and it's fun, or the duality that leads to greed. That's 2. Let's say you look at the clock, it's 1:11, 1:11. It usually is very positive. It is that supreme consciousness that leads to 3. 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. Because the total, the reducing to the smallest number of any numbers, reducing to 1 digit, is very wise, will indicate you the main trend of a number, what it means in its separated components. So 111 is 3. So it's about expansion, and 111 means the origin, the all potential is presence and conscious as its first, secondary and third and final position. You have all this in 1:11 when you watch the clock. If you watch the clock like this as a freak, so you make sure to eventually take the good numbers, it doesn't work. If it always naturally happens, then it has a meaning for you. Okay? It's an influence. It just means God is trying to tell you something, which is okay. Usually in a state of denial, you don't always see these beautiful numbers. Is it cool so far? The 3 positions of 1, the 3 positions of 2. Okay. I'm not expecting anyone to remember by heart or by mind everything. We'll eventually have a big chart. 2 is a house and a mother giving birth. It is simultaneously the feeling of being into something like a house, of being into, or the feeling of being pushed out of. So it directly relates to security or insecurity. And in Kyo, we're aware there's me and something else. I need to pay attention to the interaction. It's still not interaction, but it's the components that will later interact. They exist. So the responsibility aspects starts with the 2 also. Breathe. Three. Is interaction, expansion, and transformation. In its first position, 3 is expansion. Before there is a median position, when there's just 3, but nothing else, it's becoming. The original 3 is everything that came out of the original 2, which is the potential of the original 1. So that supreme consciousness of being 1, that originates through production of everything. 1 plus 2 equals 3. It goes wow! 3 in its original experience or first position is expansion. So that's why a triangle in its form is the expansion. The reason for which in Arpujian we do a triangle for the Zai instead of what most do like this. Some tradition actually do a circle, trying to do a circle like third eye I see for the supernatural power. We're about you will manifest everything, so forget about that precise one, just manifest everything. Expand, just. So 3 in its original or first position, in the first position number, is expansion. In the median position, somewhere in a longer number, it's interaction. It is those multiple forces expanding that will collide, that will affect one another, mix. We're not talking about alchemy yet, but they do interact. This expanding energy expands somewhere, and if there's nothing, it just expands. But in a median position means it expands into something. Let's consider the median position means 11 or more. Therefore, there is already a 1 to 9 that exists and a 10 that consolidated the first 9 series. So the numbers, when applied in first position, do not consider that anything existed before, because there was nothing yet. But from the second position and on, there is multiple things in the universe now. So 3 in its median position, somewhere in the number, means interacting, because there is something to interact with. Because we have already 1 to 10 or 1 to 9 in a consolidating 10. Okay, do you understand this? So there is no interaction in a first position 3 when it's all about what comes out. So 3 just by itself is expansion. When it's later than the primary position, it's about interaction. When the final step, the finality, the end result is 3, it's transformation, which is the result of interacting forces. One expanding on another that was crushed, it changes. Or 2 equal forces, therefore combining, becoming another one, transform, a new one. So this is not producing in terms of giving birth. It is producing in terms of combining elements to generate another. Like chemical components, binded to make different acids and products, chemical products. Yes? That's 1, 2, 3. So 333, when you happen to see this, is alchemy. It's that power that expands, that will affect everything, interact with everything, and make it all into something else. It is a sublime change of thing. It's not just change in terms of acting differently, but changes the matter and the substance and the potential energy that is doing the change. You become something else. It's not just a different way of doing. It's a different person doing it. And that explains that 333 is 9, the mud, the sublime substance. There is something. And the mud is the result of 2 forces interacting, water and earth, for example. It's not just mud. It's a combination of expanding forces or combining interactive things that were shaken and molded. It's not just earth with water over it. It's a mix, a combining, a fusing into. That's 3. So you 3, 3, 3 have the mud of 9. Mud is a symbol because 9 means light. Okay. Light can be seen as mud from a being that is more subtle than light. Maybe light is something dense if it is perceived from an even more subtle point of view. So the Kabbalist mud of 9 is that original light, because it is from that mud that came 10, the intelligence of being able to know things. Okay. So as I go in numbers, I start to introduce the possibilities of their results later on, so that you'll always conceive that numbers are series of experiences. My advanced students here are transcending. Half of them, and you don't see them on camera, huh? Half of them are like, oh my God. Except Ganeshakti is taking note of everything. I'm going to make that chart. Okay? You're alive? Breathe. A 1, a 1, a 1, 2, 3. We're not at 4 yet. There's a very complex way explaining the numbers in 5 positions. As the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth position. That is way too complex as an introduction, unnecessary. There's also a system of 9, but not efficient. Imagine the possibilities. The system of 3 is enough for any type of reading, of knowing, of understanding. Which is the first, any other, or final position. So now that we've seen 3, you see also in 3 those 3 main concepts of past, present, future, origin, median, final. Okay. So in a card reading or numeric reading, what's going on? Usually it's all about the presence, the present tense, right now. But sometimes it is what you are now since the beginning. What's going on now as what's happening now, and what you are getting or will get. What you're getting now or what you will get as a result in the final card or final number. Okay? It's good to understand these concepts. The difficulty remains. Is it an upside or a reversed card? In tarot, it's easy to see. Sometimes the reversed is good. So it's not always bad to have a reversed devil, a reversed death, and a reversed God Tower. That's a symbol of ultimate humility. Of accepting everything that will happen without arguing ever. As opposed to an upside devil, a downside death. Oh, stop right there. You're going to argue now. Okay? It's always a question of context. Okay? Let's take a break.